Why is a human being valuable?
I say it's because we have rationality. I mean, we reason and we have logic, and we have say like we we look towards a future. Yes, rationally.
Okay, if the value of human beings is based on their being rational, does that mean that people who go to Harvard are more valuable than people who go to a junior college? In other words, if human values based on being rational are intelligent people with a high IQ more valuable than handicapped people who are mentally challenged?
No.
Okay, why not?
Um, they still have a potential, or people with lesser IQ have a still potential to live out a life. I mean, live out a life different from those that have higher IQs. So they have a potential life.
Okay. I think what the scriptures teach are that we all have equal value. Why? Because we all are not accidents. We all are human beings created by God for a purpose. And that purpose is not to go to Harvard. That purpose is to love God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbors ourselves. And a person in a hospital bed, a person who's mentally challenged, can do that in their own unique way. In other words, the only reason we have value, I'm convinced, is because we're not cosmic accidents. We're not pond scum evolved to a higher order by chance. We're human beings created by God, an intelligent being for a purpose. And because we're created for a purpose, we have an innate value. That's why I get very frustrated intellectually with my atheist friends, who are wonderful people, but who try and maintain that human life has an innate intrinsic value. Friend, I'm sorry. If there is no God, it means our number came up in a Monte Carlo game. We're here by chance. And to argue that we have innate value is trying to look at reality through rose-colored glasses. If I get to the point where I say, you know something, I really hate your guts, and I murder you, that is absolute evil. Because what I'm saying is, hey, God, when you made him, lousy job. And that's a lie. When God made you, he did a beautiful job. And if I can't face reality and realize that, and if I choose to murder you or to denigrate you with a racist slur, that's evil.
But if someone is is in a has an accident, they go into a persistent vegetative state. Doesn't that person not continue God's purpose because they can't do the Great Commission? They can't go out and they can't speak vocally. I mean, what's their purpose on earth from that point on? I mean,
You bet. All right, very difficult ethical question you're raising. It's a question that I, because I happen to be a pastor, have to deal with on a semi-regular basis. Aging parents, and if someone goes into a coma, what do you do? All right. From my perspective as a follower of Christ, I'm going never to speed a person's death, but I am going to respect a person's right to die with dignity. And if they define that as, please do not hook me up to a machine and simply keep my heart beating through a machine, I respect that. I do not feel that that is suicide at all. That is instead a desire to be able to die with dignity. But when someone says to me, Cliff, let's inject poison into a person's body to speed their death, I say no. For me, that is incredibly disrespectful. And when they die on their own, they die on their own. But I am not going to speed their death. And I have a younger brother who's a transplant surgeon. And he, as a doctor here in the United States, is committed to preserving life, not injecting chemicals into someone's body. Obviously, where this gets incredibly difficult emotionally is when you see an elderly person who does not want to live. They're either comatose or they're in such agony. But that's not true. If they're in such agony, morphine can take care of that. It's more the comatose situation that you're talking about. Okay, so if they're in a morphine coma or a different type of coma, why, Cliff, would you try and save their life? Because I respect the value that God has given that life, but to save their life does not mean I'm committed to doing radical machinery work on them to keep them breathing.
thanks, man.
We say that a lot of our decisions and a lot of the words that I choose to use in my speech or anything that I do is affected by external and internal stimuli. So externally, I was, fortunate enough to be raised in an educated household. I was fortunate enough to be raised, in the United States, all these reasons. So for example, my mannerisms, right? Holding my hands here. I took theater in high school, right? So that's why I learned you have a box. There's a place when you speak, this is where you keep your hands instead of down here, right? But it's not my free will. I'm not consciously making the decision to keep my hands in the square. It's just happening. So when people make decisions. Uh, for example, the guy that like shot everyone down, I guess in the 70s, right, had a tumor, and you would say, okay, he was 60s or 70s, but he had a tumor, and you would say, okay, he was sick. So you would separate the sick from the health. But what about when we can't see exactly what is causing that change? So here you had a physical tumor. But in my case, there's not something, maybe I'm a little bit neurotic, or maybe I'm a little bit, like right now, I'm shaking. But I'm not conscious of this shaking. It's something that's an internal stimuli. There's chemicals that are going on that's making me shake. So, how can you argue, I guess, free will against external and internal stimuli?
Okay, great question. If I'm walking around the corner of this building later today, and a gentleman walking towards me has a stack of books under his arm, he's balding. As soon as I see the guy, I haul back and hit him as hard as I can. I'm hauled into a court of law. The judge says, Cliff, why did you hit the professor? And I say, Your Honor, when I was a little child, my dad abused me. My dad was slightly balding, and whenever he abused me, he would pick up a big book and slam me over the head. And so when I saw that professor coming around the corner there, he just so reminded me of my dad that I had to haul back and hit him as hard as I could. Fortunately, the legal system in the United States is based on the idea of free will. And I'm sure the judge will say, well, Cliff, I'm very sorry that your dad abused you that way, but you are still responsible for the way you hit that professor.
Are you though, or could you argue that someone who wasn't abused, say you had a 30% extra chance probability of hitting that person as opposed to someone else? It was the perfect storm. You were abused. It was sunny. You were irritated, whatever. There's external stimuli. As soon as you saw him, you had an instant increase in cortisol. You had an instant increase, lots of things that you weren't aware of that caused you to hit him. And we want to argue and say that these things are free will, but the scientific community would say that it's not free. Like for example, there was this experiment done where they hooked up these electrodes to the brain and they would ask the subjects questions. And before they were actually conscious of the question and the answer, there were just blurs. There were these stimuli being released. And this concept is that we constantly have these releases of chemicals that are releasing without you being aware of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, like I said, that person who was abused, you want to say that they have the free will to hold back. But what if that was just like a knee jerk? Like when you're scared, right? And you there's an instinct. Am I being conscious of that instinct? No, it's instinctual because maybe as a kid I was hit so many times that my instinct is to raise my hand. And so that instinct, maybe, and then we divide, well, there's a difference between instinct and choice, but where's the line? Like we want to say that we know it, but I don't think that we do.
All right, great points. One of the reasons I like the Bible so much is because of its depiction of us as human beings. We are physical. No question about it. So, in other words, there are chemicals in my brain that go off, right? Secondly, our environment affects us. Why, in Matthew chapter 19, does Jesus say, God allowed you to divorce each other at the time of Moses because of the hardness of your hearts? So God acknowledges you're profoundly influenced by your environment, no question about it. So you're influenced by your genetic makeup, your physical being. You're influenced by your environment, no question about it. You're influenced by the social institutions that surround you when you grow up, no question about it. But then there's this third thing of a will. You still have a will. Now, for those who disagree with that, I would ask them to examine their lives. Tonight, I can sit on the corner of my bed and perceive myself, judge myself, reflect upon how I answered people well or how I answered people poorly. I can say to myself, as I did last night, when this rascal and this rascal said, Cliff, you used a word that we cannot allow you to use. I said, guys, you're right. I shouldn't have used that word out here. So I can reflect. I can know myself. I can critique myself. I can analyze myself. Well, guess what? I'm convinced so can every one of you.
And where do those analytical abilities come from?
They come from
Were you taught to analyze, like through university, through your parents, through this skill that you think you were naturally born with, or do you think you were taught to analyze? So I know there's analytical classes you can teach you
right.
how to analyze things.
I have never met a human being anywhere I've traveled around the world who is not capable of self-reflection, knowing themselves. I think it's part of how we're hardwired. We have this ability to choose. Now, don't we hold ourselves responsible? Don't we hold others responsible for the free decisions that we make? I mean, if you ask me, Cliff, why did you curse this guy up one side and down the other? And I say, well, because of what I ate this morning. I don't think you're going to accept that. Or if I say, well, because it's the way I was raised, I think you'll say, well, Cliff, I'm sorry that that behavior was modeled for you, but I'm still going to hold you responsible for the way you just lambasted this guy.
Right.
Okay, that's the way we live our lives. So if we live our lives that way, and yet we believe that we don't have free will, I'd say we've got a contradiction here between our worldview, our view of reality, versus the way we experience reality.
I'd like to maybe also take this into the area that it's not here anymore. The homosexuality thing, right? We like to divide things, I think, into categories that are easy to understand, which is there's straight, heterosexual, homosexual. Well, those are the same. Transgender. Just quick, like yes or no. Being not heterosexual is a sin.
No. Being not heterosexual is not a sin. Sin is the decision.
So the Bible doesn't say it's a sin. There's no sin in homosexuality.
There is no sin in having different desires. The question is, how do I handle those desires? That's the issue. There is nothing sinful about me as a heterosexual male having a desire to have sex with many women. The question is, how do I handle that desire? And if I date rape, that's sin. And if I lust and use a woman in my head to get a vicarious thrill, that's sin. If I commit adultery, if I have premarital sex, that's a sin. But being hardwired with a nature that says, I want to have sex with many good-looking women, it's not a sin. The question is, how do I handle that? That's the issue, which gets right back to free will.
How would you speak to people who are, like, say, a eunuch, or someone who's born with both?
I would say, okay, guess what? You're born scarred. I'm born scarred. We're all born scarred. If you don't believe me, just work in a daycare center. The cutest little kids pick up sand and rocks and throw it in each other's face. What are they doing? They're adorable, precious little kids slapping each other. You know, where's that coming from? I love the analysis of Jesus. We have a proclivity to sin. There's a readiness to sin factor in each one of us. There's also a conscience in each one of us that enables us to understand what's good and to then to decide to do that good. So we really are mixed up kids. That's why we need Jesus Christ to forgive us for the wrong that we've freely chosen to do, and then to give us wisdom and power to do the good instead of to do that which is wrong. You see, I'm out here trying to introduce people to the closest friend I have, Jesus Christ. Why? First of all, because I'm convinced that Christ wants to transform each one of us. That's what the Christian life is. It's a process of transformation where Christ changes our character. See, I don't agree with the hyper-Republicans and the hyper-Democrats around here who think the solution to our problems is government. Less government, more government, it's government. Baloney. I really disagree with people who say, no, technology, that's the real solution to our problems, technology. Give me a break. H.G. Wells thought that the solution to the world's problems was science and technology. Then H.G. Wells watched Nazi Germany, the most highly technological, highly scientific nation of the world, commit some of the most horrible atrocities imaginable. Dachau, Auschwitz, Buchenwald. And H.G. Wells wrote a book called The Fate of Man. And in this book, H.G. Wells writes, my faith in science My faith in human beings is bankrupt because I have watched the most highly scientific, highly technological nation of the world, Nazi Germany, commit barbarism off the charts. I am convinced that the solution to our problems is not ultimately science, it's not ultimately technology, it's not ultimately money, it's not ultimately government. It's the transformation of the human heart that Jesus Christ brings about when we put our faith in him and commit our lives to him. And let's be real honest. We all got faith. Problem is, I think some of us have faith in government, others of us have faith in money, others of us have our ultimate faith in technology, in ourselves. And I'm standing here saying the evidence is Jesus Christ is reliable in a way that none of the options are.
Okay. The main thing I wanted to hear was if you had thought that homosexuality was wrong in and of itself, but you're saying they're equal playing fields with heterosexuality. Everyone else, Bible didn't say it's sin. No human being, and that's it. And it's more just the today sitting that we have to take care of.
No, to practice homosexual sex is sinful. To practice polygamy is sinful. To practice premarital sex is sinful. But to be oriented towards homosexual sex, to be oriented towards having sex with many people of the opposite sex, that orientation is not sinful in itself. It shows that we're scarred, but sin is a decision to act in a wrong way, to entertain a thought, to allow it to become an imagination.
So the question then would just go back to if homosexual sex, that's okay. So two people of the same blood type that have to both be XX chromosome, they would both have to have the same genitalia. If they have sex, then that's a sin. But what if you're born with both genitalia, or there was a female who competed at the Olympics, phenotypically female, born with XY chromosomes? What is the right thing for her to do? Like what to you makes someone sex? Is it their blood type? Is it their genitalia? Is it their brain makeup? What makes someone one singular sex so that we can know the difference between the male and female so that we can make sure that they're not being sinful and we can pair them up? Because if there's any confusion, then that automatically makes it it makes it impossible for them to actually make the right choice.
Okay. Mark Twain said, it's not the parts of the Bible I don't understand that disturb me. It's the parts of the Bible I do understand that disturb me. So I think it's real clear that when you and I are born, you're a female, I'm a male. When that is not the case, in a few situations, that becomes a very difficult ethical decision in terms of, is this person going to choose to follow male or female? What is the surgery going to involve? Etc. And that's a very difficult decision. And you're right, things become gray quickly, very confusing very quickly. But let's be honest, that is a very, very small sliver of the population.
Does it matter what percentage it is? As long as it exists, there exists some sort of fallacy. There's some sort of conundrum. Why would God make someone be born with both a vagina and a penis? Why would you be born with both?
For the same reason that some of us are born with spina bifida. Not because God likes spina bifida, but because we are born into an unfair, messed up world where there is genetic breakdown.
If your entire argument is that we should take this as true because the Old and New Testament say that it is true, then we can say that Harry Potter is true because we have 8 books that say that it is true. So if it's just the book, the only thing that stands behind the book is the fact that we believe that this book is true. It doesn't mean that it is true. It just means that we believe that it is so.
Very good. So thanks for asking the question. Why do I trust the New Testament Gospels to give me accurate historical information about Jesus of Nazareth? Great question. Because I have tests that I use on any document that claims to be historical.
Okay.
And I would love to hear your tests after I give you my tests.
Okay.
My tests are 4 in number.
Okay.
Internal consistency, meaning by that, are there contradictions within the text that point to massive confusion on the part of the author? No, when you read the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you have uniform and divergent details, which I love. Not contradicting each other, but different books containing different details, which smacks of authenticity on the part of the authors. I like that. Second test, literary style. Is the literary style of the document once upon a time in the land of Nod? Or is the literary style at this time in this place with these people around, Jesus said this and did that? That is the literary style of the Gospels, historical narrative, eyewitness reportage. Third test, archaeology. Are we talking about Jesus floating a boat out to the island of Atlantis? No, sir. We're talking about Bethlehem, Nazareth, Sea of Galilee, Jerusalem, Rome. Are we talking about Mickey Mouse, Elmer Fudd and his cronies? No. We're talking about Pontius Pilate, Herod Agrippa, Tiberius Caesar, Caiaphas, Ananias, historically verifiable individuals. Fourth test. Yeah, but the Gospels are almost 2,000 years old. What gives us any degree of certainty that we really have what the eyewitnesses wrote? Today, the Gospels that we have in English are based on over 5,000 Greek manuscripts or pieces of manuscript dated from the 2nd through the 10th century AD, all agreeing to an infinitesimal degree. The evidence is overwhelming.
So your evidence is internal consistency. So if I wrote a story with the correct tone, referencing real places, using without contradiction, and I got a whole bunch of my good friends to like write other stories about it, 200 years from now, that's going to be whatever. So those are your tests?
Those four tests: internal consistency, literary style, archaeological evidence, and manuscript evidence.
Okay, so what specific manuscripts like are we talking about?
The ones I just mentioned, over
Okay, the
5,000 Greek
archaeological-
manuscripts.
Okay, so these theoretical manuscripts that may exist say that Jesus rose from the dead because they said that, like, manuscripts of what? What are they manuscripting?
Manuscripts
History
of Matthew,
or-
Mark, Luke, and John.
Okay,
See, the
so
question is,
they're
do we have the
self-referential.
eyewitness accounts kept accurately for today?
Okay, so we know that they kept them accurately because
Yeah.
they didn't just write a whole bunch of stories.
No, that's not the point I'm making.
Okay, so
The
please.
point I'm making is, how do we know 2,000 years after Christ that we have an accurate historical document? That was your question that I'm answering.
Yes.
We're not getting all these tangents. You asked a very specific question. I'm answering it very specifically.
And I am very specifically taking down each one of your qualifications for why that is the case.
Literary style,
Right.
internal consistency,
Very right.
archaeology, and manuscript evidence. Those are my four tests.
Okay, so internal consistency, right? If we have internal consistency within any story, that would make it like a really good story. Is that correct? So if there's no contradictions inherent with the story, then like you have a great story. That's like the qualification of being a good story. Because if you read something then like, wow, this really contradicts what they said in the first book or whatever, you're like, this story sucks. So like, I could say probably that most good literature is internally consistent, regardless of its like historical accuracy or whatever. Number two, for your archaeological is a hugely interpretive process. So like we could just find this and say, oh man, these hieroglyphs must mean this, but like that's not true. They didn't mean that. We think that they mean that because of our interpretation of what happened in history. We don't know that for sure. And then on your manuscript, whenever you have these 5,000 manuscripts of whatever, it's not like they're copyright laws back then. What if they're just recounting a good story from the time? Like they're like, oh man, this would be great if this happened. So it's retelling of the same stories.
Okay, so now what are the tests that you use to determine historical reliability?
They don't. I think that most history probably isn't that reliable, which is why I'm always skeptical of things that I read. I don't believe them because I feel like the degree to which I can be certain is not enough for me to believe them.
Fair enough. Which means you don't know with any degree of certainty that George Washington was the first president of the United States.
Yeah.
You don't know that Napoleon fought the Battle of Waterloo.
Probably did. I can't say for any degree of certainty that I know that.
You don't know that there was a Nazi Holocaust.
Let's see. Okay. And then, okay.
How do you know
so
they're not lying?
Okay, so that is true, but the lying part could easily go for the lying argument could easily go for you. Number two, it's not just Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then a whole bunch of people told a really cool story. It's the all the accounts of the soldiers that were there and all these other people that were actually there that can actually give us recordings from the time period. And then, secondarily, I think that we often like fetishize the Bible to that degree. It's like, oh no, nobody can be wrong about this. This is so right. How can you dare like disagree with that? And I think that whenever we go about trying to test the validity of whether or not this is actually a historical document or not, is not critical enough. Because we say that there's 5,000 manuscripts, but we have not actually read these manuscripts. We don't know if these manuscripts are just like rehashing of the cool story that Matthew and the bros wrote.
It is my privilege to debate Muslim professors on university campuses.
Great.
I can promise you I would never look into the face of a Muslim and say, you know, the evidence is Muhammad never lived.
I mean, but
That is so naive.
Okay, so
That is so dishonest intellectually.
okay.
The overwhelming evidence is Muhammad lived. He was a real space-time person, and we have a very accurate presentation of Muhammad's beliefs in the Quran, which has been carefully preserved over the past 1,500 years.
Okay, number one, ad hominem attacks are like really low. Number two, especially with regards to the calling me like naive. So let's not resort to that.
I didn't say that.
Okay.
I said I debate
Implication
Muslim
and rhetorics count.
professors.
Number two,
And if I were to say to a Muslim professor or any Muslim, I'm sorry, you don't have enough evidence that Muhammad really
so
lived.
now you're
That
saying
shows
that
a
I
disrespect for all of the evidence that indeed Muhammad was an historical person.
don't- Okay,
but
so
for
now
them it works though. But
Pardon?
But for Muslim people, it works for them. So
No, that is not.
no.
That is not the argument of my Muslim friend.
Okay, you're saying that I can disagree with you because
didn't
it'd
say
be
that once.
disrespectful to
I
disagree
said
with you?
that you have not produced yet for me a better set of tests that you use to determine historicity. And what I've heard you say instead was, you haven't answered my question about what are your tests that you use to determine historicity. Instead, you've said, I don't think we can know history. Fine. So I'm telling you, I totally disagree with you. I think historical knowledge is legitimate and valid. And when I debate Muslims, I'm not going to go at the angle of, well, you know, can't know whether Muhammad really ever lived. No, the overwhelming historical evidence is Muhammad really lived. I disagree with a man, but to try and maintain that Muhammad never existed because I don't have enough historical evidence is intellectually dishonest. Because there's more than enough historical evidence that Muhammad was a real historical person. That's all I'm saying.
But from their perspective, it's true to them.
Okay,
That's not the issue we're talking about.
But it does have because your two eyeballs are perspectives.
Okay, that's
The
great.
two eyeballs are two different perspectives.
It is.
Okay, so for number one, I could use your test.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. So if I use your test, I can come up with something else that meets your definition of historicity.
I sure hope you can. You got a history department here. I sure hope you accept historical knowledge
But
as a
should
legitimate
we
form of knowledge.
believe the
You guys are
fact-
paying a lot of money to take history courses.
Okay, but
You better not walk into your history class and say, you know, this is all bunk because you can't know anything historically. That would be a little naive, I think.
So if we believe everything that we are presented in such a way that you define like as historicity, we then should believe that Washington was our god because he did something like insurmountable as whatever. I don't understand where you're drawing the line at where you're supposed to be going.
George Washington never claimed to be God. He claimed to worship God.
Okay, so Jesus just claimed to be God.
Yeah, he did.
Okay, great. So if Jesus just claimed to be God, and we have no verifiable way to prove that such is the case.
Well, if he rose from the dead, don't you think that's solid evidence that he's not blowing smoke when he claims to be God?
I think that the fact that he raised from the dead is not verifiable. I'd say that I'd be really questionable of George Washington if he said that he raised from the dead too.
Well, so would I. Because the evidence is Washington died and stayed dead. Doctors tried to keep him alive, but they didn't succeed. Jesus Christ died, but 3 days later, he rose from the dead, and over a period of 40 days, over 500 people see him at different times in different places, risen from the dead. It's pretty impressive.
Okay.
And they died for it. They were martyred for it. And hypocrites and martyrs are not made of the same stuff. Hypocrites and martyrs are not made of the same stuff. These guys said, we saw Jesus risen from the dead, and they died for what they claimed to have seen.
Okay, great. That is fantastic.
I'm
But
glad you believe that.
even
Now go
by
on with your faith in Christ.
Okay, so no. What I'm saying is that even by your own standards, it doesn't make any difference. Like, it does not make a single bit of difference. If you can't, like, even by your own test, can't verify the fact that it is a historical document, then that does not make any difference. With beyond reasonable doubt, and there is, like, reasonable doubt, to be sure.
Oh, sure, I struggle with doubt. We all struggle with doubt. If you don't struggle with doubt, you're brain dead, probably. So everybody struggles with doubt. The question is, what do you do with your doubts? I hope you allow your doubts to motivate you to study more carefully, to question more deeply, to look at options. Now, I hear you saying, beyond reasonable doubt. Okay, so anybody who says to me, the reason I can't put my faith in Christ is because I can't see evidence beyond reasonable doubt that point to him being reliable, so I don't believe in him.
Okay.
Fine. Then please tell me, who or what are you living for? And then second question, what's the evidence in which you are living for is beyond reasonable doubt?
Okay. So there are three things. Number one, I never, ever claim that the reason why I would not believe would be because I don't believe that these are historical texts. I'm saying that because we can't verify that these are historical texts, that's a reason to doubt, but that is not the reason I am saying that I do not or would not believe. And I think that by saying that there is no other reason to believe is inherently close-minded, and what you're trying to promote is that this open-mindedness of accepting of Jesus and all this other stuff, but your rhetoric points otherwise. Like the way that you speak about the subject, the way that you talk about the subject is inherently disenfranchising to people who are not necessarily do not necessarily agree with you.
Well, if I've offended you in any way, I'm sorry. I don't mean to offend you.
I'm not offended.
Okay, good. So what's your point?
I read that there's people probably over there that are offended because they're.
I don't care that they're offended. That's not what I'm saying.
But
What are you saying? Let's clarify, please, so I understand.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that the assertion that I was the person that said that I'm the person that says that the fact that I cannot verify that these are historical texts means that I disagree, that I defer agnostic or atheist is wrong. I am saying that we can go back and look at manuscripts from a whole bunch of other people and find that they was wrong. We could find that out, that it is wrong. And we do that on a consistent basis. We find out that what we know is wrong, whether that be from, whether that be in science or whether that be in society.
Mm-hmm.
We find out continuously that what we thought was true was false.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying that if we cannot do that now, then we cannot do that at all. And we cannot do that at all with somebody who claims to be God.
Right. And if it can be shown that Jesus did not rise from the dead,
so
faith in Christ is idiotic. But if the evidence is he did rise from the dead, then faith in Christ is wise.
Yeah, I think that's a huge straw man argument, and putting
straw man.
Yeah.
In what way?
Yeah, that'd be. I'd never said that belief in Christ was idiotic, and
No, I said it.
Yeah, I realize that you said it, but the rhetoric he uses is very inflammatory towards anybody who does not believe.
It's what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15. In 1 Corinthians 15, the Apostle Paul says, if Jesus Christ is not risen from the dead, we are fools for believing in him. So I'm just repeating his argument. But if Jesus Christ has risen from the dead, then faith in Christ is very wise.
All right, and we know this because a book that was written 2,000 years ago and a whole bunch of other people like the book a lot. No.
He's appealing to logic.
Logic.
Work it out. Parse it out. If you die and rise from the dead, I promise to listen very carefully to everything you have to say.
Really?
Really.
Okay. So I'm going to just stock my heart.
Pardon?
CPR, and then you listen.
If you die, are medically dead, 3 days in the tomb, and you rise from the dead, I promise to listen very carefully to everything you have to say. Why? Because the evidence is you
That
are
I am
amazing.
God. The evidence is that I am God.
No, the evidence
No.
is you're amazing. Then I'll
Okay.
listen to you.
Okay.
And if you tell me you took this neat drug and that you tricked the medical profession and you weren't really dead, but you resuscitated, then that's one thing. But if the evidence is you really were dead and then you come back from the dead, I will be very impressed.
But if I tell you afterwards that I'm God, then who do you know? I am God.
Yeah, and if you tell me that you're God in human form after you rise from the dead, I will be prone to believe you.
Great.
So go ahead and do it.
That is fantastic.
Well, okay,
I
but
think-
what if we took stem cells from him and cloned him? Would that make it?
I don't care about stem cells.
But I do. But I'm saying you're just being like him. You're not open to anyone else's. So it's
It's just like, okay, so stem cells, great. I believe that it is definitely medically possible in the future to live forever, but like not right now. You're right. Like right now, no, there's no way. We are done for right now. I think that in the future, I think that it's a vast misstep to think that we will not progress to the point that where that is possible. And I think that humans are progressing to that point and probably will eventually.
Okay. I'm not going to bank my life on it, but okay.
There you go.
I need more evidence.
Need more evidence.
See, that's why I find a gentleman like you, your thinking, to be fascinating. You tell me that you can't believe in Christ because there's reasonable doubt. But then you go on and say, but it is possible, very possible, that we human beings are going to be able to advance scientifically and medically to the point where we're going to live for eternity.
So you're
going to convince me that that's not beyond reasonable doubt.
okay. So your evidence
Come
is
on,
empirical.
Ay, ay, ay.
Okay, no. So your evidence is empirical. You're saying that 1 out of 1 people die, right? It's an empirical proof.
I'm saying the evidence is the
Yes or no,
statistics on death are overwhelming.
Okay, great.
1 out of 1 die.
Okay, that is empirical evidence. Okay, so this guy comes up to you, right? And he goes, "Give me your money, or I'm gonna shoot you." And you go, "Nah, you won't shoot me. I've never been shot before." So, like, you're saying that whenever you are, because every single person up to this point has died, then that is the case forever. But like, you have never been shot before up to this point. So now you're saying that I will not get shot in the future because of the fact that I have not been shot in the past.
I can promise you, sir, I would never say or believe that I'm not going to be shot in the future because I've never been shot in the past. I don't understand what you're trying to say.
I'm trying to say that you're basing your entire argument on the fact that we will die in the future on empirical proofs, and empirical proofs are inherently false. Like, they're unverifiable.
I never used the word empirical.
You're right, you didn't, but what's the form of the argument you used was empirical. Trust me.
No, I'm not going to trust you.
All right, great. Don't trust me.
Okay?
So maybe then, like, we need to, like, have a, like, some discourse on, empirical evidence and empirical proofs. So
define empirical proof.
Okay, so empirical proof is an analysis based on previous experiences. So like, it's anecdotal, basically. You're saying that because something happened in the past, it'll happen in the future. But I'm using the inverse of that to prove that it is false. Yeah.
You've lost me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm not very smart, okay? So I haven't been able to understand what you just said.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But I mean, I'm sure he at one point knew what he was talking about.
I still do know what I'm talking
But
about.
I mean, but from his perspective, he didn't understand it.
Okay, that's fine. Hey.
It's funny.
Now, what do you think about Jesus Christ?
What do I think about Jesus
Yeah.
Christ? If he existed, he was a really great guy.
Why do you think he was a great guy?
I think that if he existed, he was a really great guy. Because I think that he spread a lot of messages that were really cool. Like I agree with a lot of the stuff he says. I don't think he's God.
Said?
What?
How do you know what Jesus said?
What he is supposed to have said. I'm sorry.
Okay, good. I like that consistency. So you really don't think that Jesus really lived?
I don't know that he lived, but if he did live, I'm making the concession that if he did live, like a lot of stuff he said was really cool. Some of them I don't agree with entirely, at all. So, like, I can't invest myself fully. But if he lived, I think that he was probably a really good guy.
Right. But when you read his teachings, what becomes clear is he says, not follow my teachings as much as he says, follow me. He says, put your faith and trust in me.